NDA presidential candidate Draupadi Murmu has arrived to file her nomination papers. Murmu arrived along with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and other top BJP leaders. Yes, viewers, as you can clearly see on your screens, a big breaking news coming in, and of course, there you see Draupadi Murmu being flanked on both sides by, of course, none other than Prime Minister Narendra Modi, BJP National President JP Nadda, and on the other side, we have the Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh, as well as other top BJP leaders present, and of course, Union Home Minister Amit Shah also there seated alongside Draupadi Murmu. And viewers, these are live visuals we are receiving from inside the Parliament House. Yes, indeed, viewers, these are live visuals as Draupadi Murmu, the NDA candidate for the forthcoming presidential elections, is all set to file her nomination papers in moments from now. As you can clearly see, these are live visuals that we have accessed from inside the parliament, and Draupadi Murmu, of course, being accompanied by the top brass of this BJP, including, of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself, the BJP National President JP Nadda, Union Home Minister Amit Shah, Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh, as well as other top brass of the BJP. Yes, indeed, viewers, a very big moment for the NDA alliance as their presidential candidate Draupadi Murmu is in the process of filing her nomination papers for the all-important presidential elections. And it is very significant here, viewers, as of course, as I mentioned, Draupadi Murmu, if elected, will become the country's first ever tribal woman president of India. And that this is, of course, the first time that a tribal woman candidate has been named by the NDA or any other party for the matter as a presidential candidate. And of course, she will become, if elected, the first tribal woman president of the country and only the second woman president after, of course, Pratibha Patil. And of course, Draupadi Murmu has been hailed by all the leaders of the BJP, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi being one of the first ones to hail Draupadi Murmu as someone who understands the situation on the ground. She has a good understanding of the ground situation and has also hailed her vision for India's development as extraordinary. These were words by none other than the Prime Minister himself, who has time and again reiterated that Draupadi Murmu will make a very good president for the country. And of course, behind him also we can see quite a few leaders of the BJP. There on the far right, we can also see the Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sharma seated, as well as we also have the former Chief Minister of Assam and Union Ayush Minister Sarbananda Sonowal. And on the left of your screens, just moments ago, we also saw the Meghalaya Chief Minister Conrad Sangma also present to accompany Draupadi Murmu as she files her nomination papers. A big moment indeed for the NDA alliance as their presidential candidate, a historic occasion, in fact, if I may say so myself, as the first ever tribal woman presidential candidate has been put forth for the upcoming presidential elections. And of course, prominent BJP chief ministers are also present there, as you can clearly see, which of course also includes the Nagaland Chief Minister Nephew Rio, the Manipur Chief Minister N. Biren Singh, and then right behind Prime Minister Modi, clearly we can also see the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath also seated. Yes, indeed, viewers, continuous live visuals that we are receiving from inside the Parliament House as a very important occasion this for the NDA alliance, as Prime Minister Modi himself as well as the top brass of the Bharatiya Janata Party are seated and are accompanying Draupadi Murmu, the NDA presidential candidate, as she files her nomination papers in the Parliament House today. And also let me remind our viewers at this point, the NDA's presidential candidate Draupadi Murmu had arrived in the national capital earlier from Bhubaneswar and is filing her nomination papers today in the presence of the top brass of the BJP. And earlier in the day, her nomination papers were prepared at the Parliamentary Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi's residence in the national capital. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, senior ministers Rajnath Singh, Amit Shah and BJP National President JP Nadda are clearly, as you can see, accompanying Draupadi Murmu as she files her nomination papers. And besides several Delhi BJP leaders, including State President Adesh Gupta, party MPs Manoj Tiwari and Ramesh Biduri, the leader of opposition in the Delhi Assembly, welcomed Draupadi Murmu at the Delhi airport earlier in the day. Murmu, who was staying at the Odisha Bhavan, also is being accompanied by the top brass of the BJP as well as its alliance partners. And of course, to make the nomination event an even more grand event, the BJP has invited its allies as well as the Biju Janata Dal, which has announced its support for Draupadi Murmu to attend this nomination filing. And earlier, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had hailed the NDA presidential candidate Draupadi Murmu for what he called her understanding of the problems on the ground and dubbed her vision for India's development as extraordinary. These were the very words used by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to describe the vision that Draupadi Murmu has for the future and the development of India, and called it, and termed it rather, as extraordinary. And after having met the Prime Minister in New Delhi yesterday, the presidential candidate of the NDA, Draupadi Murmu, also called on Union Home Minister Amit Shah as well as the other top leaders of the central government. All the top brass of the BJP are present here alongside Draupadi Murmu as she files her nomination papers at the Parliament. Viewers, clearly on your screens, all the who's who, the top brass of the Bharatiya Janata Party, as well as prominent chief ministers of the BJP ruled states, all are present here at the Parliament House in the national capital alongside Draupadi Murmu. Indeed, a massive show of strength here, viewers, by the NDA as Draupadi Murmu is making history at the Parliament House, the first tribal woman candidate for the presidential elections, viewers. So yes, viewers, lots of activity going on at the Parliament House. As you can clearly see now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the process of signing on as a proposer of Draupadi Murmu, the NDA presidential candidate. Yes, viewers, one by one now, all the top leaders of the BJP and its allies signing on as seconders and proposers of the presidential candidate Draupadi Murmu. It seems as though the nomination filing process has been finally completed, viewers. A standing ovation given to Draupadi Murmu, the NDA presidential candidate, as she has completed the nomination filing for the upcoming presidential elections. Indeed, a historical day for the NDA alliance, viewers. A historic day as the first ever woman tribal candidate for the ensuing presidential polls has filed her nomination papers in New Delhi today. Yes, viewers, indeed, all the top leaders are now filing out of the Parliament House, and of course a round of ovation as the nomination filing procedure has been successfully completed for NDA's presidential candidate Draupadi Murmu. Yes, viewers, as you can clearly see now, the Draupadi Murmu acknowledging the appreciation by all her peers, the BJP leaders and the NDA partners, as she makes her way out from the Parliament House after having completed the filing of nomination for the presidential elections. So indeed, viewers, now after having made her way out from the returning officer's office, now presidential candidate for the NDA, Draupadi Murmu, acknowledging all of the supporters that have gathered for her nomination filing papers today. And of course, let me also at this moment brief our viewers a little bit about who actually is Draupadi Murmu, the first ever tribal woman presidential candidate that has been chosen. So Draupadi Murmu is a tribal leader hailing from Orissa, and of course she was named earlier as the ruling NDA's candidate for the presidential elections.